Depression is a coping skill. Hear that again. Depression is a coping skill. How can you cope with a coping skill? You see, in my experience, it could be yours too. I have memories, repressed memories of sexual trauma. And in being traumatized as a child, not having many resources psychologically, I learned to just try to escape either in my mind, in my will, in my emotions. And I turned to being depressed as a coping skill to deal with the trauma. That was the only thing I could think to do as a kid. A lot of the times your inner child is still wounded and harmed. I could see if being traumatized as a teenager or as an adult where you have more psychological resources, but when you're traumatized as a child, that sticks with you and it stays in your body because kids are kinesthetic. They like to move, they like to play. They're deep in their bodies as we should be. But when that body is being violated, they're left with no other option than to go to some warped aspect of their mind. Well, not go to, it's not there. They create a warped aspect of their mind. And so when you're challenged with something, you turn to depression to hide pain, to hide what you're going through. Depression is not a mental illness. It's a coping mechanism. It's a defense mechanism, y'all. I know they don't say that in mainstream psychology, but this is what Kayla is saying. Kayla Jackson is saying depression is a coping skill. Don't look for ways to cope with depression. Depression is already the coping skill. Unearth your repressed traumas and memories of being violated as a child. If you have chronic depression, maybe you were just physically abused, maybe you were psychologically abused, maybe you had chronic boredom and was neglected. Neglect is a trauma. Maybe you have a repressed memory of being neglected in a time of need. It could be something as simple as that. But anyways, just realize that depression is a coping skill. It's a byproduct of trying to deal with something. Most likely as a child where you didn't know much about how to cope.